Good evening, everybody, and welcome to History Bite number 12, dated August the 20th, 2020. I'm Walter, your mobile historian and blue-collar scholar. This History Bite is entitled America's Three Two-Party Systems. We are all quite familiar with the present-day Republican and Democrat-dominated party system in this country. But of course, those two parties are now hardly the only ones that have always dominated the American political scene. As I mentioned to you in History Bite number 11, political parties have existed in their current form in this country since the 1790s, and it was in the 1796 presidential election that parties for the first time nominated candidates to the presidency. Of course, we have always had a litany of different political parties in this country, but in every period in American history, we have always been dominated by, for all intents and purposes, a two-party system. So, let's rewind and go all the way back to the 1790s with the first party system. The first party system in this country lasted from the 1790s roughly until the 1820s. The Federalists and the Democratic Republicans were the two dominant parties in the country during this era. During this time, there was only one Federalist president elected, John Adams. All the rest were Democratic Republican. The Federalist Party died pretty much at the end of the 1810s, the early 1820s, and the Democratic Republican Party simply renamed itself the Democratic Party. All right? It is the same Democratic Party which exists to this very day. The first Democratic president ever elected was Andrew Jackson in 1828. All right? That brings us to an end of the first party system and to the second two-party system. That two-party system was dominated by the Democrats and the Whigs. Early on in this era, the Democrats were all by their lonesome as a national political party until the Whig Party came around in roughly around the early 1830s to challenge the policies of President Andrew Jackson and his dominating Democratic Party. The Whig Party was pretty successful in lasting about 20 years. Like I said, this era is from the 1830s to the 1850s. There were four Whig presidents, the first of which was President William Henry Harrison, all right, in 1840, all right? So towards the mid-range point of the 1850s, the Whig Party consolidated with the Free Soil Party, and that combination gave birth to a brand new party dedicated to halting the spread of slavery westward, and the name of that party was, folks, yes, you guessed it, the Republican Party. So that brings us to the end of the second two-party system and to the third and present two-party system dominated by Democrats and Republicans. All right? The third two-party system in this country began roughly in the late 1850s, or some would say 1860, with the election of the first Republican president, Abraham Lincoln. But unlike the Whig Party, the Republican Party grew to be a mighty force in American politics. With the election of its first president in 1860, like I said, Lincoln, the Republican Party would go on to win every single presidential election after that time until that of 1884, when they were defeated by Democratic nominee Grover Cleveland. All right, Grover Cleveland was the first Democrat to win the presidency since James Buchanan in 1856, Lincoln's predecessor. Lincoln's predecessor who indeed let the country fall apart, literally, and left Lincoln to clean up the mess. So, that's pretty much the summation of our three two-party systems in this country. And of course, we know that the Republican Party of yesteryear, of that era in which it was created, was completely different in ideology from the Republican Party of today. The Democratic Party of that era was completely different in ideology from the Democratic Party of today. Republicans of that time would more readily be able to identify with the Democratic Party of today. Similarly, Democratic Party members of that era would be more likely to identify with the Republican Party in the modern times. So, I hope you learned something from this brief but informative history bite about America's three two-party systems. Share the knowledge with others, like I said, and I will talk to you at the next history bite. Take care.